Hello everyone, my name is Fred, and I'm going to tell you how I fell in love with my teacher and almost ruined her life. It all started with an important test. My friend Ethan and I, as usual, were not prepared. And in order to not get bad grades, we decided to take extreme measures. As soon as the bell rang, we set fire to a trash can in the toilet and brought it to the fire alarm. That old trick worked! Sirens and loud footsteps sounded in the corridor. Everyone was taken outside away from the school, and Ethan and I were lost in the crowd. But we were still identified by the cameras. I stared guiltily at the floor while Mrs. Green scolded us, but she was so kind that she didn't even call our parents to school. We got off with a wet cleaning in the classroom. But the next day, I felt uneasy. Instead of Mrs. Green, the principal came to class. Would we really not escape punishment after all? But then the principal announced the unexpected news. Mrs. Green has retired, and now you will have a new math teacher, Mrs. Parker. Meet the class. I was expecting someone like Mrs. Green when I suddenly saw such a beauty enter the classroom. I stared at the new teacher, and Ethan nudged me. Pretty, isn't she? And just a little older than us. She was incredible. I could listen to her for hours. But as ill luck would have it, classmates terribly bothered. The girls were gossiping about something, and the guys were browsing through their phones. Mrs. Parker winced at every laugh they made. I felt so damn sorry for her, and in the end, I couldn't stand it. Can you finally shut up? My classmates looked at me with incomprehension, and Mrs. Parker with gratitude. She enthusiastically began to explain a new topic, but the next test showed that no one was listening to her after all. I was the only one who passed it perfectly, and for the first time, I was praised for my studies. Take your cue from Fred, but so be it. For the first time, I will allow you to retake. Oh, it was a bad idea. After this indulgence, my classmates became completely cheeky. One girl even refused to go to the blackboard. I can't get out of my chair. You, as a woman, just have to understand me. Of course, Sarah didn't have any problems. After the lesson, she ran off to the buffet as soon as a bell. The discipline in math lessons was getting worse and worse, and I saw how frustrating that was for Mrs. Parker. But one day, she still couldn't stand it and gave bad grades to everyone who didn't do their homework. Classmates were offended, but Ethan had the strangest reaction. The next morning, he was clearly in a bad mood. Because of this newbie, my parents took away all my pocket money. What does she have to do with it? It's your own fault. Hey, when did my bro Fred turn into a nudnik? In general, I don't know you, but I put everyone up to cut the math class. I've had enough of Fs. When the bell rang, only 3 people remained in the classroom. I had no idea that so many classmates would settle upon Ethan's stupid plan. Mrs. Parker looked helplessly around the empty classroom, but still pulled herself together and began the lesson, when suddenly the principal entered the classroom. Where are all the students? Maybe they're late? Didn't you warn them that I would be attending class today? Mrs. Parker nervously leafed through the register, and I excused myself, ran out into the hallway, and dialed Ethan. Quickly, gather everyone and come back. The principal came. You're going to get Mrs. Parker in trouble. I don't give a damn about her problems. I hit the ceiling. Okay then, alright. Then I'll have to send your Sarah that video where you kiss another girl. At the last party, remember? You wouldn't do that. If I were you, I would hurry up. I was looking forward to my classmates, but no one showed up. The principal was so angry that he called Mrs. Parker into his office. I hurried after them and pressed myself against the door. I can't leave like this. You have to find an approach to this class and make the children respect you. I give you a month. If nothing changes during this time, then we will have to say goodbye to you. I was terribly angry at my friend because it was all because of him. I took out my phone and sent the video to Sarah. It'll serve Ethan right. All day I was thinking about how to help my teacher, but at home my sister took my mind off. Freddie, you promised to take me to the amusement park. Oops, I completely forgot about it. But there was nothing to do. I had to fulfill my promise. Admittedly, Amy and I had a great time in the park. I wish we could come here instead of school. Then I would never skip class. Instead of school, I wouldn't skip class. Good girl, little sister. She, without knowing it, gave me a brilliant idea. In the evening, I printed out a note in which I suggested to hold a class right in the park to Mrs. Parker and incentivize the excellence of students, to let them ride the craziest roller coasters. In the morning, I quietly dropped a note on the teacher's desk and waited. But a week passed and we were still sitting in the stuffy classroom. Classmates did not listen to Mrs. Parker and disrupted lessons. I was already completely desperate when suddenly, yes, Mrs. Parker invited us to a class in the park and even bought tickets to the rides. She did exactly as I suggested. The faces of the classmates were simply shown. They suddenly put down their phones and began obediently copying equations from the blackboard. My plan succeeded. Almost everyone passed the test on a new topic and received a well-deserved bonus. I screamed so much on the roller coaster that I even became a horse. But it was worth it. Mrs. Parker was beaming with joy, and I admired her smile all evening. As you may have guessed, I continued to throw my anonymous tips to the teacher. Thanks to them, our lessons became unforgettable. Wherever we studied mathematics, Mrs. Parker taught at the food court, at the trampoline center, on the basketball court, and even at the zoo. In just 2 weeks, our class changed from being the worst to an exemplary one. I was sure that the teacher didn't even know who was helping her. But one day, she stopped me at recess. "Fred, I'm very embarrassed to discuss this, but your letters." But I just wanted to take them away. And please, don't get me wrong. I'm a teacher, you're a student, and there can be nothing between us but studying. Oh no, the teacher somehow figured me out. With trembling hands, I opened one of the envelopes. Suddenly, instead of the printed text, I saw my own handwriting. These were not the clues I left for Mrs. Parker, but what was it? And then I remembered, a year ago, I was in love with a classmate of mine, Ashley, but I was so scared to admit it to her that I wrote love letters and asked Ethan to pass them on. It all clicked in my head at once. Ethan decided to get revenge for my setup with the video. He got these fiery letters from Ashley and slipped them on Mrs. Parker's desk. She recognized my handwriting. Now it looked as if I had written confessions of love to her. Mrs. Parker, this is not what you think at all. Let's pretend these letters didn't happen. Plus, you will soon have another math teacher. I only have one lesson left. My heart was pounding wildly. How? But why? You see, the School of Higher Mathematics got interested in my unusual studies, and they invited me to work. This is one of the most prestigious schools in the country, and teachers there probably earn a whole lot more money. But I just couldn't be happy for Mrs. Parker. After all, if she leaves, I'll never see her again. Just thinking about it sent goosebumps all over my body. I decided to postpone my revenge on Ethan and, at all costs, interfere with the plans of my beloved teacher. And by the end of the class, I had a crazy idea. I printed out 2 notes. I put one stealthy on Mrs. Parker's desk, as usual, and the other in the principal's office. The next day, everything happened as I had planned. The teacher gathered us in the classroom. Guys, today we will have our last lesson, and I want to make it special. So run and change your clothes. We're going to the beach. It was very hot on the beach, but not because of the weather at all. Mrs. Parker in a red swimsuit was just fire. I admired her figure and even forgot about what would happen next according to my script. Meanwhile, the principal was approaching us. I'd never seen him so angry before. It's time to explain everything. Just try to understand me. The news of Mrs. Parker's departure upset me so much that I decided on meanness. In the note, I suggested to teach a lesson on the beach to her, and I wrote the principal that the math teacher had planned on an obscene lesson and would show off in front of the students wearing only a swimsuit. I hoped that this would spoil Mrs. Parker's impeccable reputation, and she would not be accepted into an elite school. Then she would have to stay here. But things didn't go according to plan at all. The principal called Mrs. Parker to his office, and I overheard their conversation at the door. How can you explain your behavior? And what if the parents of our students find out about it? But after all, you yourself suggested I spend the last lesson on the beach in that note. Why are you lying? I didn't write any notes. I'm sorry, Your action is beyond the pale. We no longer need your services, and I will make sure that you are no longer allowed to teach in any school. What have I done? Mrs. Parker is out of a job because of me. I saw her packing up in tears, but I never found the courage to admit everything. She left, and my life became simply unbearable. My consequences was tormenting me all month. I imagined Mrs. Parker saving money for food and not being able to pay her bills. I would continue to get myself worked up, but one day I met Mrs. Parker in the park. She was still beautiful and didn't look pathetic at all as I imagined. When the teacher saw me, she waved her hand affably. Fred, I'm so glad to see you. Mrs. Parker, how are you? Here, we went for a walk with my family. She pointed at the man and the little girl. My breath caught in my throat. She was sitting in a wheelchair. Is she your daughter? Yes, Grace can't walk yet, but we found a good doctor. He promised to put her on her feet. Is she going to have surgery? Mrs. Parker suddenly looked sad. Yes, but I don't know when. The operation is very expensive, and I still have difficulties with job. It's all because of me. Because of me, the little girl is still in a wheelchair. I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. Mrs. Parker, I'm sorry. I fell in love with you at first sight, and then I overheard your conversation with the principal. I was afraid that you would be fired, so I decided to help. Anyway, all these notes, they're from me, and the last one too. I set it up. I hoped that after the scandal on the beach, you would not be taken to an elite school and you would have to stay with us. But everything went wrong, and I, a coward, was even afraid to tell you the truth. But you have told me finally. Don't blame yourself. You wanted the best, and I really appreciate it. But when I found about Mrs. Parker's problems, I began to blame myself even more. I just had to fix it. And the next morning, I explained everything to the principal, the way it really happened. But he just shook his head. Mrs. Parker is an adult, and she is the only one responsible for her actions. And you, mister, better direct your energy to study. I left the office with nothing, but I still wasn't going to give up. I was lingering down the hallway and wondering what to do now when I suddenly bumped into Ethan. Watch your step. Hey man, are you all right? You don't look yourself. I didn't expect to find support from an ex-friend. Ethan listened to my story and carefully offered to help. A friend of my father's is the principal of the Lakeside School. Well, the one where Bill Gates studied. I'll ask Dad to talk to him. Maybe they need a good math teacher. And imagine, Ethan really helped. Mrs. Parker was invited to work at the prestigious school. However, for this, she had to move to Seattle. I was very worried that I wouldn't see her again, but 3 months later, she called me via video call. Her daughter took her first steps after the operation and will soon be able to walk without a wheelchair. After what Ethan did, I couldn't be mad at him anymore. We were reconciling and began to amuse the classmates with our antics. But I suddenly stopped wanting to misbehave. A new student joined our class, and I fell in love again. Can you advise me how to get her attention? This is the SCP Foundation, a secret organization that finds and studies anomalous objects all over the planet. These are the Foundation's secret files. You may already be familiar with them. And these are the stories of ordinary people who got lucky to encounter the most horrifying creatures in the world. The SCP Chronicles reveal new details about the anomalous objects you didn't know before.